What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fresh Podcast, where we bring everything fresh in entertainment. I am your host, Drew Brumfield, and joining with me is the whole cast this time, and we got Randy. How you doing?
Doing fantastic.
Thank you, Randy. We also have Seth. Seth, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How about the rest of y'all?
I will ask the rest of y'all because I have one more person to ask, and that is Robert. How are you doing?
Howdy, I'm doing fine.
And he is doing fine because we are here talking about Assassin's Creed again. Yes, finally again, we're on part 3. Took about, what was it, like 5 months to get from part 2 to part 3? Something
So,
like that.
To be fair, the games keep
right?
getting bigger.
It was in November whenever we put up that podcast. So it's been about 8 months now. Better late than never.
We got done.
Didn't we stop halfway through, or not stop halfway through, but didn't we stop and cover like the future of Assassin's Creed? So we had an Assassin's Creed podcast.
No,
Yeah, but that
it was
was like
actually
the
before.
next episode.
Oh,
Those two were like right next to each other as well. It's not like there was like a big break in between. But we are back, and we were talking about to be quite fair, two of the worst games in the series. And this will probably be called like us comparing them because we're gonna figure out today which one actually is the worst game of the series. Before we start that, I want to give a big thanks to all the support on our shorts and TikToks and stuff. If you don't know, we have a TikTok page. We also do YouTube shorts where we post like short form content. I've got a lot of support and nice messages on my recent FF6 video, so thank you for that if you did that. And I should have a few more soon, maybe a little Assassin's Creed video in the future. I stumbled my way through that so bad. That was awful. And I also
made it.
I also want to give a thanks to Randy, as most people probably have noticed from this recording. I sound a lot better than I normally do. And that is because Randy, for my birthday, has gifted me a very nice, very fancy mic. So the podcast sounds much more professional now. So
At least
thank
for
you, my
one
friend.
of us.
For one of us. I can't do anything about y'all.
What perchance is the name of microphone?
I can
it
send it in
was-
chat later. I would have to look it up.
It's not like
And
a
we're-
snowball mic or anything.
No, it's
we're
not a
not- no,
snowball
it's a
mic. Screw
Samsung.
that overpriced shit.
Yeah. And if Samsung, if you want to sponsor this podcast, you know how
Yeah,
to
it's a
find me.
Samsung.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
pretty
anyway.
decent.
It
I
is
heard the
pretty
refrigerators
decent.
suck.
All right, Seth, calm down. I'm trying to get a sponsor here, okay? I need you to stop.
I'm not letting this sell out.
I am. It's
How much
trying-
times have we like shouted out Game Pass on here?
and we're gonna keep
It's not
shouting
bad.
out, and we're gonna keep shouting out Game Pass. So go and play Game Pass if you own an Xbox or any PC and like a Microsoft
think-
account.
I think one of these games is on Game Pass. It's Syndicate or probably like Odyssey. I don't know.
They were on Games with Gold a while ago. All right, we're getting off track. Can we? Let's just start the thing. Yes. So we're talking about both UT and Syndicate, and we're gonna just go by them at the same time. There's no point going by one and then the other. We're gonna be comparing, contrasting them. So let's just go ahead and start with probably what at least two of you want to talk about the most here, and that's the gameplay and the movement of these games. Pretty stark difference. For those who don't know, Unity was Ubisoft's kind of big attempt at making Assassin's Creed co-op. They had done competitive multiplayer in the past, but this is his first time being like, you know what, let's try and make it you can run around with your buddies and do Assassin's things. And as a concept, fantastic concept. You will never hear me dissing that idea. I think they should bring that back. I think it's a great concept. I don't think it was executed well, but that's what we'll get into later. And unfortunately, it didn't, as I mentioned, it didn't do very well, very buggy. And so they moved on to Syndicate, where they kind of backpedaled into the more traditional style of Assassin's Creed. Really, the only things they added were things like grappling hooks and different gadgets and stuff, but it still plays like you think of like a traditional Assassin's Creed. Syndicate was the last one last mainline game before they went on to the more RPG style with Odyssey, Valhalla, and those type games. So I'll go ahead and throw it to Seth first. Seth, how would you describe like the movement for I got in either Unity or Syndicate, and do you have a preference between the others?
Damn, you just dumped a lot on us
All right.
and going
You,
up. Okay.
I think
Well,
we're losing you.
Seth, you still there?
Yeah, basically, but no, I'm still here.
Okay, you're good. You just kind
Hello?
of robot out there for a second. You're good.
All right.
Keep going. Yeah.
That's always fun when it happens. I would say with Unity, because I think it's best to start with there. It's very interesting to see the reception behind that game in terms of its movement, because back when this game was released, it basically became the poster child of broken S games. There's a bunch of like glitches and shit that people like bagged on about, but as time has gone on, a lot of people have come around and said that AC Unity is their favorite parkour out of all of them. I don't know if you guys have seen that online, but that's definitely the kind of reactions I've seen. Am I incorrect in that? That a lot of people have just kind of come around and said like, "Oh yeah, Unity has the best parkour."
Yeah, when I
yeah,
was like
what I've
doing
seen.
some like research and stuff before this podcast, a lot of videos I was running into were people saying like, "Oh yeah, the parkour was like this is some of the best parkour in the series."
Yeah. I'm gonna have to disagree with that because I think there's a lot of issues with this game's parkour system. I think it's fun, and I think the reason why a lot of people like it is it looks nice. It's a very good looking parkour system. These are some of the best animations that Ubisoft have ever done in pretty much any of their games, period, in my opinion. In terms of like the movements, the way Arno like vaults and jumps and makes these massive like leaps where it looks like he's throwing all of his heft forward, like just in this like leap of faith, for lack of a better word.
Arno
These
does
look so
fly through
great.
this game. He almost levitates to certain platforms at certain points.
Yeah, but like I think it looks great, but it controls not so well. Not really even the controls themselves. It's just the way that Arno feels. There's a lot of weight behind his movement, and I'm not sure it's for the best. Basically, if you want to test these kinds of things out, like how good a movement feels in a character, try turning them around or having them run in a small circle. Like, for example, something like Devil May Cry 5, Dante will basically turn on a dime. He's like very fluid, feels very easy to control. But Arno, like you have like these long animations where you have to commit where he's turning back and forth. And as a result, it results in feeling very weighty. But I also feel like with the parkour animations, even though they look great, like because they absolutely do. Like even like whenever we had like our little co-op session that I showed you, Drew, like the way to do the side ejects, those look phenomenal. The way that like he could scale up and just sort of kick off of like protrusions in the buildings and onto higher ledges, it looks great. The problem is there's not. I hate to sound like elitist here. There's not really a lot of skill to the parkour because it's just like you can kind of just hold down the parkour up button and parkour around and look good doing it. You don't really have to think too much about where you're going most of the time. You really don't ever run into a danger of like Arno ever killing himself by making a bad jump, because if you ever notice it, if you try to make a jump off the side of a ledge or something, the game will stop you. Now it is possible, but you basically have to make a deliberate choice of just mashing the button down. It's just like, no, I want Arno to make the freaking jump and like
I want Arno to break his ankles right now. Do it.
And as a result, it takes out a lot of the the tension that you need in like a parkour system to feel fun. Is that like if everything you do looks great, and if everything you do is always going to land in a successful ledge grab and an successful jump, then is it really all that great of a parkour system? It feels in weird ways just more on rails before than ever, because like even though Paris looks gorgeous, the game is setting it up so that you have guardrails everywhere you're going, so that poor baby like Assassin's Creed players can't hurt themselves. And that's kind of where I stand on like Unity's parkour system. Is I would love for these animations to come back. I really do, because I love the way Arno looks in movement in this game. But I also want some of that freedom that the Ezio trilogy and
Yeah.
even like
Kenway
AC3
Saga.
and 4 had.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of my thoughts on Unity.
Yeah.
I don't. Do you want me to go straight into Syndicate? Because
No, we
you're
don't
gonna
have
get a little
to.
bit more.
Yeah. We'll good because I feel I'll ask Randy's kind of comparison. It's just like you also spent a lot of hours into Unity as well, Randy, and like what's your kind of response to like the parkour system, the way Arno moves, and like that kind of thing. Even comparing it to like the older games as well, if you want to.
Yeah, I think that it was a good system that needed more refinement in comparison to being butchered and ripped out, but we'll get to that. I think it's good to have some weight to it because if I'm remembering correctly, I mean, Connor had a lot of weight in 3, and at least I enjoyed that aspect. It felt like you could get him to turn quickly, and I think that's still here, but some of the animations they used, you could see him like struggling to stop his momentum to try and like turn into a building and whatnot. And I think some of that is still here. I don't think it's as prevalent, at least in my experience, but and I mean, yeah, you can make it look good, but I think it adds some nice controls having a dedicated free run up and free run down in comparison to the Kenway Saga games of just hold right trigger for everything.
Well, I mean, you're still doing that though with just 1 or 2
Yeah.
buttons. Like that's the thing, right? It's like
I
it's
mean,
not that
yeah,
much
but I
different.
mean, it's if we're saying 1 or 2 buttons, then I mean, the original games was right trigger and A. Sure, it
Like-
was like it was between a jog or actual like high profile for the original games.
Yeah,
But I think this still
I'm
has depth to it.
I-
A shallow depth.
I'm sorry.
But
But like it like here's the thing though, Randy. It has even less button presses because like whenever like I was talking about the side ejects earlier before, like I showed Drew how to do those. If you remember in like older Assassin's Creed games, you at least had to double press like the parkour up button to make that happen, to make like wall ejects and side ejects and actually aim it to places. Whereas in AC Unity, when you do the side ejects, it's mostly just holding down parkour up and then just choosing the right moment to just use the left thumbstick to just guide them into whichever direction you want them to take it. It's even less input. And I agree. I do like the idea of more weight behind the movements. That's actually not a bad thing, but more weight behind the movements, but also no risks. That's the problem. It's just like it's like it would be cool that you do have to take into account Arno's speed and weight whenever you have to make like decisions when you're jumping, so he doesn't kill himself. But as I pointed out earlier, like there's no danger. Like you can like you have to force yourself to kill yourself as Arno in this game.
So I think a lot of this, like, I think a lot of this boils down to like in like the original. When I say original games, I mean like the Ezio trilogy and also like the Kenway Saga. But like in those games, there is like way more parkour options than like I think people realize. And like what Seth's talking about, like the wall ejects, the side ejects, like the swinging on stuff and like whipping around your character. I think the reason you don't see it in 4 is because there's not a lot of areas to do it in. But like the reason that a lot of people don't know about those games, I think why a lot of people don't care that stuff is way easier to do now and there's no risk is because people never used it in the past game, because the game never really tells you or like gives you opportunities.
Gives you a reason to.
Yeah, it gives you you never like if you can play all the main like traditional style Assassin's Creed play and never do a side eject and you'd be fine.
Okay.
It never has asked you to do that.
for the most part, there are a few like tombs where
Okay,
it,
yes,
you
but
have
like
it,
for like a
but-
puzzle, like not. But I mean,
that's
like,
usually more like scenarios, not just like
Yeah.
running
Yeah,
around
like
the
you
whole
wouldn't
like
do
you're
it
not like
to, like-
you're not like chasing a target and like they're on a horse and you have to like side eject to keep up with them. Like no, if you ever anytime like there's the chasing missions, it's a very obvious path they take you on, and it's usually just like an up down type. There's usually a few more options, but like it's a pretty straight line for the most part.
Yeah, and if anything, that's another thing that Unity's kind of like missing is there's only one section that I remember, and that's whenever you get Thomas the Carillion's armor, the basically black Altair armor set, which does look really cool. that's the only time in the game where it actually seems to challenge you with like some sort of like parkour puzzle. But beyond that, the game doesn't really have anything like that again. And that moment lasts for like maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, they
Fair.
do have like, I wouldn't call it like a parkour puzzle, but they do have those like weird moments where you get like teleported to like World War II France. But like that doesn't really like, that's not a challenge. That's basically like an on rails like
It's a
spectacle
set piece.
moment. Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
set piece.
It's a set
Yeah.
piece. There's no like challenge behind that. So I think that's kind of the ultimate like issue with Unity's parkour is like, and I think that's the reason that there's like such a big fan base for it is because like, oh, I can do all these cool things. Like, well, you could do all those cool things in the last game. It just
It didn't have as much style to it.
not
you
even
could do it.
well, no, not
but,
even
like,
that. It's just like the game. A, the game didn't tell you, and B, like there wasn't it didn't like it wasn't as easy. Like you didn't. I accidentally did wall ejects and side ejects in Unity all the time. I'm like, it looked cool, and that's why I was trying to like go, but like I think what Seth's getting at is like there's like a lot of like videos of like the older ones, even with 4, which doesn't have that many areas to do it in, of just like really cool, almost like parkour videos of just like there is a system kind of buried in there, but it's just not as fleshed out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And like,
oh, go ahead.
and like, I think one thing I want to add is like, and I like, there's nothing wrong about making the system like necessarily like easier or more accessible, or just like, you know, making these systems more like apparent. It's just like, I think there's a way we could have done this without just making it like completely just, you know, like, oh, like you, as long as you parkour forward, you'll always look good doing it. I think there's a way that you could like, if anything, if the system would just remove those guardrails, you know, from like high ledges, I think that would just make this parkour system already like 5 times better.
I mean, you basically can remove. I mean, you just have to commit that. Yes, I'm wanting to jump off this, which, if I remember, is still the case in 4. If you're running forward, he'll stop unless you press A to confirm that you're jumping off. I don't have it installed right now. Otherwise, I would boot it up and check. But
no, as someone who recently replayed 4, there were plenty of times where I was running a bit too fast and fucking threw myself off of a building.
Just ate shit.
And just like, yeah. Like I'm running through the trees or whatever, and I accidentally tell Kenway to just like jump off the big tree and not towards the branch because I didn't hold like the stick the right way.
And I think like that's something that we miss. Is like the cool moments are cooler whenever you know that there's a chance for failure. And like you're right, Randy, it's committing. But I think what's cool is when you're in the flow of parkour and you're not fully planning, you're just in the flow and you're just kind of making decisions on the fly. What's fun is the fact that you can potentially make a on the fly decision that gets you killed or really hurt or just fuck up your flow. In like most other parkour systems in AC. And with Unity, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's just those guardrails make it a lot harder for that kind of system to happen.
Yeah. So
I suppose, but if we're
are
we moving on to Syndicate's movement? Or I guess
yeah, I was going to because I feel like that's what I feel like. You're right, Robert. Yeah, go. Wait, let Robert put his in 2 cents, and then yes, you can talk about Syndicate's movement. That's my yeah.
So I think what makes it Unity's like stand out a little more to like a lot of people is just how like dynamic the animations are.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I noticed like when I first played Unity. It was like the animations for parkour are a lot more like I guess expressive for lack of a better term. Like he has a lot more dynamic movement, which with it.
If only the character was dynamic and expressive.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll stop interrupting you.
No, but it's like, because like the movement's a lot more fluid, it makes people feel like their inputs are doing more. When in all actuality, it's really just like it's like a placebo. It's like you feel like you're doing more when you're really not.
It's like a quick time event.
No, I think I just thought of a really good analogy. It's kind of like in a lot of like whether it's fighting games or whether it's in like an action game like DMC, it's like turning the assisted combo system on. It's like even though you're just mashing the square button over and over, you're doing all kinds of cool combos. But that's just because you have like the assisted combo thing on.
Yeah.
It's like that's why you look great doing it. It's
Yeah,
because
because you play on
really
modern
games make all
control.
decisions
Yeah,
for you.
Because you can,
It's
because you
the
play on modern
animations
controls
carrying
on
the
Street Fighter.
gameplay. Yeah.
I know that. I
And-
understand that reference.
Anyone who plays on modern controls in Street Fighter is a bitch. Anyway, Randy.
Yes.
So
Shall
your
we
turn.
for Syndicate?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I just had to call
All right,
out.
if the entire premise of saying Unity's, okay, I won't say bad, but is restrictive, how are we gonna at least agree on that they butchered and ripped out the system for an even more restricted version in Syndicate?
Yeah, I could agree with that because
fair.
one thing I definitely noticed is whenever you got into Syndicate, we talked about the side ejects where not only did they look stylish, but they were like also ways of quickly gaining ground when you're scaling up.
Also,
I noticed
relatively reliable in regards to context of being like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, at right moment, move,
Yeah.
stick.
yeah, and then like in Syndicate, I agree because I agree with you that like it's definitely like much worse in Syndicate because in Syndicate what you get is basically the distance between where you can side eject to seems to be heavily reduced, as well as the height that you gain off of it as well. So it's
Yeah.
just it's harder to pull off, and it's also less useful.
Yeah.
Same
So,
goes for
like,
back
okay,
ejects as well.
so,
Back
no,
ejects, you basically are useless.
Yeah, and it's like and it doesn't help that also the spacing in London just feels so much more open and less I don't know how to describe it. Stuff hanging from the walls to parkour off of, you know.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
just the best
I
way to
think
describe
that's
it. Less
I think-
stuff.
Who's going?
You're going.
No, you're going,
Okay.
Robert.
Oh.
It's your turn.
Yeah, you
Okay.
go.
No, I think that's
You were
because
the one
it's
talking
basically
next.
it's an antithesis to what they did in Unity, because I think
Yeah.
what happened was like I think they bit off a little more than they could chew given the hardware. So I think their approach was basically let's scale this back to where there's a lot less like hiccups, because like if you played Unity on like PS4, Xbox One at the time it came out, it ran very rough,
Bro,
especially
if
in the more like
you play Unity
densely packed
you play
areas.
Unity on modern day Xbox or PS5, it still runs pretty rough.
Yeah, especially just on that hardware, like when it first came
And on
out.
co-op, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
co-op,
especially
yeah.
Well, I
fucking
believe,
co-op,
yeah, I
oh my
agree.
God.
Co-op never got
Yeah. So
polished.
basically,
Right.
they were like, all right, Paris was too cramped. There's too much here. We got to space this out. We got to make the less populous,
Yeah.
just so the game will run better. So I think that's kind of why everything's more spread out. Is just because we need something that won't like melt an Xbox One.
Yeah. So I'll defend a lot of things about Syndicate, but I'm not gonna defend it on its movement. That yeah, I'm never gonna. That's bad. Even as someone who's like, I agree with Seth. I'm not the biggest fan of like Unity's movement either. Again, it looks cool and it's like kind of fun, but it is like baby's first parkour. Unity's is like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, I don't like.
Syndicate. Yeah.
Fetus's first parkour, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, because if you were talking about, oh, it's restrictive, you can't even, or you have to
Yeah.
commit to jumping off of a ledge. Syndicate physically won't let you. You could stand there and mash A, say, hey, I want to jump off this building, and they're like, no.
No, that'll kill you. And
You can
like,
definitely feel
like-
the guardrails there.
like that's not even a guardrail. Like Unity has guardrails. Syndicate has brick freaking walls at the top of their building, just invisible brick walls.
That's
I'm
pretty
just like,
much it,
no.
yeah.
So like, yeah,
The best way I could describe the movement in that game, and it's like it's less of an AC game and more like a poor man Batman's Arkham game.
it
is the best way I
does.
could
It
describe
does
The,
feel like a
the
bad.
movement.
Like the movement does feel like a bad Arkham game. It's a because the grappling hook sucks.
Yeah, like, I
Well,
wish they would have
no,
given.
Here's the thing: the grappling hook, I don't think sucks, but I think it's
Or
too
not-
easily abused
not
in that game.
Sorry, sucks is the wrong word. It makes it trivial. It's too good. but there's no.
If you just wanted it to play the game for you, it can.
Yeah, that is.
And based on the way the layout of the city is, it pretty much is the best way to move around, though, because of like how far the buildings are and everything. It's just like if you decide to be like, well, I'm not going to use the grappling hook as least as I can playing this game, you're going to have a long ass time. Like the part where you get the grappling hook and you're supposed to climb Big Ben. Good luck with that. I have no idea how long that mission's gonna take you if you decide to just manually parkour up that fucker.
Just anti-grappling it, bro.
I tried initially starting with not use the grappling hook, but I eventually was like, all right, whatever, because I hate the grappling hook with a passion.
Do you want to go off on the grappling hook?
Do you talk about it?
Do you need to talk about it?
Go ahead. Yeah,
I
good, Randy.
think it could have been. It could have been great if they would have done anything to make it interactive. Literally anything. Whether it be you start grappling and you can cancel out of it and maybe back eject off of it using that momentum for extra height would have been dope. If you could cancel out of it, and maybe it only lets you do once your character reaches a certain velocity, it won't let you do it just to not rip their arm out of the socket. But if you could throw yourself from a building and at least grapple once, maybe, and do a pendulum swing, which I mean, we can't ever be like, oh, it was in the trailer, so it's in the game, because we remember from AC3 having Connor charge his way into the front line of the British, and you can't do that in the game. So in the Syndicate trailer, you see Jacob crash his carriage and falls off a bridge and grapples to save himself.
Basically swings up.
Would have been dope, but again, trailer thing, we can't be like, oh, it's in the trailer. That
would have been actually really fun to do, and I feel like that's a very easy thing to do. Just if you jump off, you can just whip yourself back up.
Maybe not even whip yourself back up, but at least have a controlled descent to maybe not just reduce fall damage, so that then you are able to, let's say, leap off of large buildings or whatever, even if there's not a hay bale to leap of faith into,
and then do the freaking Batman or Spider-Man move.
Or vertical takedowns to where the grapple launcher, aka the rope dart, could have been useful, like that one game. What was it? Black Flag? That was a game that had it right.
Black Flag had the rope dart. Yes.
3.
Yes. Black.
Where it has combat purposes. This game, nope. Even though it's basically the same tool.
Yeah. I think one thing to add on your point, especially since Drew mentioned Spider-Man also, was that one thing that I really like, I have issues also with Spider-Man PS4 and how it handles its web slinging. But one thing I really liked was the fact that you could hold down the aim button while swinging, and it will kind of slow down time, and you can kind of pick areas for Peter to sort of web zip to. It would be really cool if there was a system like that in Syndicate as well, with the grappling hook, where you could just you can maybe cancel out of your grappling hook, slow down time, and then pick specific areas to zip towards or something along those lines, or to swing from. That's another thing too, is you don't ever really swing from the grappling hook. You just kind of zip to wherever you need to go. And I think that would have added a whole other level to it. It's funny because it's I played through AC3 Liberation, and although it's very limited in how it's handled there, Aveline actually uses her whip Indiana Jones style to make certain parkour jumps, to where she will throw out the whip and swing across to the other side, and you can do assassinations from it and shit. It's neat. It's very, like I said, it had very, very limited applications in the game, but it's kind of a shame that they didn't take any lessons from that title and how they handled the grappling hook.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't want it to be Spider-Man, but I want it to maybe have, you can only do it maybe once, but maybe it'd be an interesting way to try and close distance quickly, because
you want to have more options than just go up fast.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Robert, before we move on to actual gameplay outside of parkour, any thoughts on the Syndicate movement?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys and just how it feels extremely stiff. Especially because the zip launcher basically, it's it doesn't have the dynamic feel that it would need to really be satisfying. And from when I played it like years ago, I remember it like. Does Jacob get it too, or is it just Evie that uses it?
They
They
both
both
get
have
it.
Everybody gets it.
They
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
get it. Okay, yeah, because it pretty much kind of just did parkour for me. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I could climb, or I could just like press the zipline button and then just watch as they like escalate up. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that's interactive. So yeah, parkour, and I like I said earlier, like the areas are too like wide for you to really
Yeah.
have a lot of like free flow routes.
Yeah.
So the only times you use it is if you want to run on the rooftops and you don't want to bother with the carriage, or if you're like trying to like get up a big building with like as little effort as possible. Like
Hmm.
there is a lot of like taller buildings in London, but they're not fun to climb because you just use the zip line
You
on them.
whip. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Any sense of
exactly.
scale is just instantly gone. It's just up. I'm at the
Yeah.
top of the building now.
Yeah.
Which would be bad if the game was designed around it, but it doesn't really feel like it was. But moving on from movement, the rest of like the actual gameplay, compared and Syndicate's really gameplay. I mean, it's a few small changes, but it really does just feel like classic Assassin's Creed. It does just kind of feel like 4 and 3 with some minor changes, like some extra uses of the gadget. But Unity's is straight ass. I hate the gameplay. Like actual fighting in Unity is awful. And I get the idea it was supposed to be like, well, like it feels like it was supposed to be a stealth game, but I remember like when this game was like coming out, they were promoting it of just like, oh, you can like build your guy however you want to. You and your friends can build him differently to take out certain missions in certain ways. But it really is just like fighting people is awful. It just doesn't feel good. Like the heavy attacks don't feel impactful. No attacks feel impactful. You only get one weapon. There's no way to like use like the D-pad or something to quickly switch to something else. You get your one sword, or you could switch to like, I mean, no, you can't even like auto switch to like your him. Like I don't even remember, unless you have them physically. Like you pause the game, go into the menu, equip it. The game needs to stop, load, and then you could switch to a different weapon. And it's just awful. And I just remember anytime I got on combat scenario, I just pulled out my gun, just went bang, 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 and just finished it as quick as possible because I'm like, I don't want to actually like fight anyone. The stealth is okay. It's better. Like Assassin's Creed now has a cover system, which I think works. And I do like the fact that in Unity, you can finally go inside buildings and like sneak around inside buildings. Because in previous games, like really the only time like you were in buildings, it would be like either you're like dashing through it like in 4 just to get to the other side, or you were there for like a story reason and like the only stealth was just like hiding in the crowd. Now you can actually like hide in cupboards and go around the corner. So I think that feels better. But in terms of like actual like fist fighting combat, I would give it to Syndicate. It's not that Syndicate's like doing some groundbreaking thing when it's combat, but it just like feels like an actual combat. It actually works. It feels like an actual combat system.
I kind of have to agree with that too. And like something that you see like a lot from like Unity apologists, is that they are kind of like, oh, well, the whole point of the game is you're mostly supposed to be in stealth, so combat is supposed to be a punishment. It's like, no, that is definitely not the fucking way it's supposed to be, because they built whole builds, like different armor pieces that you can select that's all about like open melee combat. It really does come down to the fact that like the melee combat, while it once again like the parkour, I think there's some really great looking executions and animations and stuff with it, but it's just so boring for lack of a better word. So much of it is just like parry, stab, parry, stab. You don't even get the satisfaction of at least like earlier games where it's like, oh, parry and then immediately fucking kill them. Now it's like parry, do some damage, and then parry, do some damage, roll sometimes when it's red, and it's very like once you see all of its tricks very early on, and I think it's like not exciting at all to like really play that combat.
So we were talking about
it's
poor
not
man's
like-
Arkham game earlier.
Well, it's
Robert.
not like they don't want you to go into combat, because if you didn't go into combat, why the hell can I carry a two-handed greatsword?
Yeah,
Exactly. Like a flamberge and like big ass axes and all this shit. Like it's like no, combat was definitely like one of the things you wanted players to do, and people who are like saying like, oh, it's a more of a stealth focus like Assassin's Creed, they don't want you to go into combat. It's like you guys are just like huffing like crazy amounts of copium right now. Like y'all need to like step back.
Because Reddy, what's your thought on like either of the game's combat system?
I am yet again. Well, I guess we agreed on movement for the most part. I still think Unity's is better than you guys are giving credit, but combat, I am the polar opposite. If with the comment you just made about poor man's Arkham, I mean, for me, it feels like when I was playing Syndicate that it was very frustrating being in combat because of the, I don't know, like stabbing a guy 80 times, especially if they were of higher level. And we can talk about the progression system maybe later, but I really hated.
I don't think we'll get to it.
Okay, I'll go very quickly on it. Just being like the progress system isn't, ooh, now you can fight guy with bigger number over his head, and having to assign skill points to get level ups to then unlock weapons. From what I remember of Unity, you had stuff that unlocked later, but it was via, I believe, story progression or crafting. But
usually like
or monetary, like money wise,
or
in-game
you
money.
just pay real money too.
I don't remember
you could
crafting. Yeah, I think the best things you just bought with money.
But it felt that I don't think that Unity's combat system is perfect by any means. I agree that it does get kind of repetitive in regards to parry, do some damage, parry, do some damage. Especially early on when you have weaker weapons or weaker armor sets that give not as much like attack bonus or whatever. But I did enjoy the weight of it, especially in comparison to Syndicate. Because Syndicate just felt like I was, I don't know, just like hitting them with a small pocket knife in comparison. But like, I understand, it's supposed to be smaller weapons because concealed carry or whatever. But even then, like the larger knife, it starts with a K, I forget how it's called, but you have pretty much about the same size knife that Altair has. But it's still just like, let me stab you and slice you like 7, 10, 15 times before you go down. It didn't feel rewarding, and it felt like the only thing holding it together, I felt, was the speed, which was a different change for Assassin's Creed. But that's what, in my opinion, the speed of it, and then like speed, like having to hit a counter button because they're like bar flash yellow, that feels Arkham to me, not the other way around. But that's just me personally. I will, like, I admit, Unity's system is not perfect, but I liked the weightiness of it personally.
Would you say that Unity is probably some of the most like committal like Assassin's Creed combat's gotten?
Oh, 100%.
At least at that point.
100%. It feels like you can, I believe, roll cancel out of certain attacks. I don't know if you could roll cancel out of a heavy, but
you can. I've definitely done that because it's like whenever you know like a guy's about to hit you with like an unblockable, you can do that. Like you can do that, and like it's nice, I guess, but it at the same time though it doesn't change the fact that it's mad repetitive, and it's just like you're just doing the same thing over and over with Unity. Like just like I said, it's like parry, sometimes dodge, and like all this shit. And like what you're getting at is like I think Syndicate is the more Arkham related one just because it's the one with the fucking combo counter in the left hand corner. Like that's why you have, and I agree, it's not a good excuse, but like since Ubisoft is definitely like kind of copying off of Batman Arkham's combat style, it's like, all right, you're doing a lot of punches really quickly, because in the left hand corner you want that number to get bigger. Basically, I think is what they're trying to feed into that dopamine hit is like how much bigger can you get that number to be?
Ooh, big number.
I want my style meter. I want the triple S on Jacob.
That's
I want to start doing
Jacob's play style. It's just,
I want to start doing Stinger.
How can we make Batman without making Batman?
Yeah.
And
but
it's like,
yeah.
yeah, you could go ahead if you want.
I mean, no, I was gonna pretty much say that sums up my opinions on it. Of it feels very like attacking with like I said, like a paper clip or something.
I mean,
It
at
doesn't like
least
I enjoy the weight and the severity it feels and commitment of Unity's
Unity, it
stuff.
feels like I'm
Yeah,
hitting
but
people with
like,
like a wet noodle, honestly.
It,
It just
yeah, and
feels
like
like I've
also,
been. You go ahead.
yeah, and like also with like Unity, I mean like, sorry, um, oh my God, I think I lost my point there. Drew, you talk about something while I
Okay,
like
yeah,
try
no,
to
Unity, like
recoup
it feels like the same like 3 attacks I did like when in the tutorial, like when they showed me the exact same things that I would do against like the final like fight, like any final fight. Like
Mhm.
combat never gets harder. You never like gain a new ability that like changes how you fight or changes like the way you attack. Combat is like it feels, at least in Syndicate, it feels purposeful. Like they actually had a design for, okay, this is how we want you to feel. Yes, it feels very Batman Arkham, but at least it felt designed and like that was the intention. Like it versus Unity where it feels like they had the game made and then like, guys, we forgot to add combat. Ah, well, crap. Well, just, light attack, heavy attack, dodge, whatever. Throw it in. Should we give them any new abilities or harder enemies towards the end? Nah, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, like I think, and I just remember my point. It's like the problem with Unity is like, despite the fact that it has like, once again, I'll defend its animations. It looks really good.
Yeah.
It's a lot like the parkour where it looks really good, but it doesn't feel that great. The game feel is so important with these games, and not to mention that Unity, I ran into way more bugs during combat than I did with Syndicate. Because with like Unity, it would be just weird things where it's like sometimes my attacks don't register. They map the A button to like the dodge button. Sorry, they were other way around. They map
I
the
was like, that's
cover button to the dodge button, which causes some issues during combat. When you're rolling around and you're just like suddenly like Arno's taking cover on like a fucking couch, it's like, nah, man, we're in the middle of a fight. You're gonna eat shit if you stay right there. It's it's not intuitive. It doesn't feel great. It's basically like you say it's more methodical, but for me, Unity's combat is just boring, and I'm there for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem, and that's the reason why whenever I get into a combat scenario, most of the time I just start spamming smoke bombs until I kill everyone.
Yep.
It's
That's the way you do
it's
Unity
not
combat.
good.
Yeah. You do that or you just pull your gun out and shoot everyone to get it done faster.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So since we now have like a separate section for it, I think this would be a good time to bring up just the like progression, like different like rank equipment system
Sure.
thing
Yeah.
that they did. So I think this was kind of like an experiment per se for what they ended up doing with like Assassin's Creed Origins or whatnot as like an RPG element. I think what they were aiming for was to give
Are you
some
talking about
kind of
Unity or
power
Syndicate
creep.
right now?
I'm talking about
Both
Unity.
on it.
I'm
Well,
about to say,
Unity is a little more what I'm thinking of, but yeah, that does apply to Syndicate too. But it's that like they're trying to make you feel like you're going through gear progression and whatnot. Which it's on paper it's a good idea. Like okay, yeah, it's like you get through a game like Arno is becoming more proficient and being able to like fight better and whatnot. That's only really shown through equip and not so much gameplay because as you guys said it's pretty much the same kind of combat from the start to finish.
yeah.
But I think what they were kind of trying to do was just they wanted to try something of RPG elements because they probably saw the feedback that people were giving to like Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 where it pretty much just turns into counter kills the video game, which
Yeah,
that's
it's like
something that they've kind of been doing since Brotherhood really once they introduced the chain killing.
Yeah, they've been doing
So,
it for 4 generations.
They tried to do a different way to like not to like address those complaints people were having and kind of test the waters for like future games because this does feel like very like experimental in various ways in like the gameplay department
Yeah.
because like I said, at the time when like Unity came out, people were getting really tired of like how the games just like the combat felt just kind of mash X, and then once you counter, that's all you do, chain kill.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're like, okay, we're going to add equipment, we're going to add some kind of progression, but I all this is to say that it makes fights feel very tanky, especially when you're like under equipped. Even if you were like kind of under equipped in like some of the older games, I don't think it was nearly as like tedious combat wise.
I'd
No,
say it
you
didn't
could.
because of the, like you said, because of the chain killing. I felt like nothing mattered in regards to like like weapon stats in any of the games up until, honestly, I mean, it mattered. It mattered a little. I remember having at least a little bit of difference in Revelations because of the Janissaries
Yeah.
and like how quickly you could kill them with like a lower level weapon versus
Yeah.
something towards the end.
There was like a slight difference.
other
in
than that,
4, but not really.
it
No.
felt like there was no point of weapons other than animation sets.
Yeah.
And some of that is, I mean, some of that is still here, even in both Syndicate and Unity, that it feels like it's just different animation sets. But I do feel that Unity's was up slightly, and I just slightly, in regards to those classic games, and same with Syndicate. If I remember, did Syndicate have weapon upgrades or just weapon types that had different stats?
It was a little
I
bit
guess
of both. It was
Regardless, it
actually a
didn't
little
really
bit.
matter. They both had that similar core system in regards to
Yeah.
weapon types.
Yeah,
So,
just like
Mostly being animation sets. So
because it was like in
That's an
Unity,
issue in both of them.
it's like in Unity, like if you were like say a three rank and you were fighting like a 4 rank enemy, you were very outclassed, and it's like you had to work a lot harder to like beat them, and sometimes they would just kind of like kill you in like 3 hits if you weren't careful. And given how sometimes Unity's combat just didn't do what you wanted to, it could lead to some really easy cheap deaths.
Yeah, there was no way to like skill your way through like a bigger enemy in Unity. I mean,
Yeah,
if you were
it was
very,
pretty much
very
equipment.
patient, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
in reality,
you
it was like you needed.
wait like forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's you know, you guys are all saying this stuff, and I'm surprised you haven't touched on the big thing of like why they're doing this loot system. It's because this is the most egregious Ubisoft got with its fucking Helix store. Let's be real. I think that's the real reason.
Yeah, no,
that they had, like, pointless tier system is so that you could spend money on fucking Helix credits so you can buy immediate. Like, you don't even go up to the stores to buy weapons like in the old games. Like, it was kind of cool where after chapter passes in like the Ezio trilogy, you could go to a store. It's like, oh, a new weapon, a new pauldron is on sale. You could buy it, and it gave like a sense of progression and time passing, and actually gave you something to do with your money. Whereas in this game, you could just buy the real money. But here's the funny thing: because they make it available right off from the get-go to purchase with real money or with the in-game currency, it's so easy to bust the progression in Unity. Literally, as soon as you unlock co-op heist missions, you can just do the damn painting mission, which is actually fairly easy to do by yourself, and just grind the shit out of it. And before you even do your first real assassination target, you can already have max level gear for the rest of the game.
I can confirm. I can confirm this entirely because that's exactly what I did on my second playthrough. When we did our little co-op, yeah, because like, we joined in, and I'm much a lower level, so we just went in, did the painting mission like 2 or 3 times, and I was like, I had such better gear than what I should. I never upgraded the sword. Like, I finished the game with that sword.
Was Unity the first one to introduce the Helix?
Unity?
No,
the Helix
AC4
was in.
Had any of that?
AC4 had it, but it was. Yeah, I thought, yeah, because I think a lot of AC4 was like a lot of its Helix and like in-store thing was like tied to like multiplayer stuff. But yeah, no, that's very accurate. It's a very good point from Seth. But what's we've talked about gameplay for a while now, and I do kind of want to move on now to let's go on to like things like characters and story and like world building. And starting with Unity, Well, the story is Romeo and Juliet. If you haven't heard that story before, which honestly, I guess if it's gonna be set in Paris, then like sure. But like, you know, it's the French Revolution, an amazing time for an assassin. That's a great setting. I never like Paris does actually look good, and like what a
Even
time
to this
period.
day, it looks. At least the
Yeah.
interiors, like some of the when you're talking like the painting mission, the interior of that building, and
Yeah,
it looks fantastic.
I
in
think
my
that's
opinion.
more, and that's honestly more just like a knock towards like real life Paris because this is a very picturesque moment. But I think it does look good. Um, but what drops Unity is the fact that A, its story is very basic, and B, its characters are very, very bland. It is
Yeah.
not. It's not Connor or Edward or Ezio. I forgot his name for a minute. But Robert, I haven't started with you on a question yet, so I will this time. What are your kind of thoughts on like, well, and also because you brought up the war, like the comparisons between the worlds. So like, I'll ask you, you know, London compared to the French Revolution. What's your kind of thoughts on these two settings?
I think there's just a lot more kind of going on with the French Revolution in terms of like nuance, and you kind of see that too throughout like just the game world in general. Is that you just see like all the chaos going in the streets as like the story progresses. Like you see like all the fights breaking out. You see all like
Yeah,
the guillotines out where they're doing like their executions. There's a lot of like that kind of weaves into the game itself that I think makes it stand out a lot more than like London. Um, because I don't remember a whole lot like happening in the world itself really in that game. Granted, it's been
yeah,
years since I played the game, but from what I remember of like the setting is that the world was pretty static for the most part. Like,
yeah.
yeah, there might be sections where there's a lot more like enemies around and such,
But I feel like the
but
world was
you
almost.
don't
Oh,
really
sorry.
you don't really feel that when you're like running around the
Yeah.
world in Syndicate.
Yeah. It almost feels like with Syndicate, they kind of overcorrected because I feel like one of the issues with Unity is there's almost like too many fucking people. Like you're running
Oh,
through the crowds
definitely.
and it's just like a giant crowd of people. I'm like, well, crap. Now
And
I
then your
got
frame rate dips.
and your frame rate
Yeah.
and then the game crashes, and that is like what causes most of the glitches, which is kind of like the big elephant that I've tried to avoid talking about with Syndicate. But yes, Unity glitches out all the freaking time, and it's annoying. But I tried to focus on like the actual gameplay itself. But you know, if it had
It is
just like
like
if it had like 20% less people, I think it would be like perfect. I think it would be great. I agree with Robert, like all like the around like settings and stuff, but it's just too many people are popping in and out, and it's just like, oh god, but even the new gen systems are like, oh, what is this garbage? What is this?
You know what's and you know what gets me is it's sometimes surprised no one's brought up as like kind of annoying is how many of the crowd events like they happen so much. Like how many
Oh.
people do I have to save from these fucking like weirdos like over and over?
like
Like
every couple
it just
blocks you find something.
This is where you guys
What?
ever seen the
No.
picture of like when you first boot up Syndicate and it's like all those fucking icons, like a million icons just flooding the map. Like I can't see anything. I don't know where my character is. Just crowded all of Paris. Like there's so much jammed packed into this city.
Yeah, and it's like one of the things I like about Unity, and I will say it's like, you know, what's one of the good things is it is one of my favorite games to just sort of like just turn my brain off and just kind of parkour around because it looks nice. Yeah, like, see, I could say like I that's something I enjoy doing, um but like one of the things that was always annoying is just like, God, why is another? I mean, and I would just ignore them, but it's still just annoying. Just like, God, why does so many people need to be saved constantly in this game? Good Lord, it's just like, calm down. Like, it surprises me that they put the game out in this state and didn't and thought like, yeah, this is a good rate. Like every like 2 seconds, someone needs to be saved.
Like, that was probably the least of their problems at that point in development.
Yeah, there was a lot
Yeah.
of things that they missed, but yeah, like
Yeah.
that was something that just annoys me. And like, you know, I'm not saying what specifically for, but I might have been recording this game, and one of the things I wanted to push for is like Unity has such great atmosphere just through its environments and like how the
Yeah.
game looks. But it kept getting interrupted because these like little icons popped up and just like, oh, this person needs to be saved by a criminal. It's like, no, you're ruining the shot, man. Stop.
I've waited
Just
so
turn the HUD
long.
off, dude.
I've waited so long for Seth to go on a Unity rant for because that was like half the reason we started doing this podcast. It finally happened. I'm so proud. I'm so happy right now. That's amazing.
Drew, it's like whenever I was trying to get like the immersive shot, it's like, you know, what news people talk when you're doing
Yeah.
like live shots.
I'm a
and then
photographer.
some fuckers are like, yeah, whenever fuckers are getting in the background of it, it's like, what the fuck? Get out!
Stop
out.
flipping off the camera, please. I just need a shot of the sign, please. If you walk
Get the
past
fuck
it,
out
it
of
makes
the way.
it makes like it's fine. Like it's fine if you're just walking past, you're not looking at the camera. It makes the shot aesthetic. But when you keep staring into the soul of the camera, I can't use that shot now. Now I gotta wait another 5 seconds for you to leave. Anyway,
Yeah, or like whenever you're trying to do like a live hit. Like here's
Yeah.
a pro tip for people in case you see news people out there with a camera. Most of the time we don't want to see you. If you can get out the way, please do.
or if
You
we're
even-
shooting nothingness, just walk past like you don't see the camera. It makes the shot look better. But if you see a camera pointed at a person and the person is talking back to the camera, ignore, like, don't bother them. They're doing their job.
Exactly.
All right,
Like
that's
most
enough.
of the time, if you see us, we want you to ignore us. That's just what we want you to do.
Trying to
Leave
show
us
real
be.
life. All right. Anyway, we went on a tangent, so I got to back us track. Let's
What were we
talk
talking
about the characters. We're talking about characters.
I thought we were
Gotcha.
talking about atmosphere.
I transitioned because we need to go because me and Seth took too long.
All right.
Yeah, the character. So I'm sure Randy's about to disagree with me on this one. But I like Jacob and Evie. I like that. I know
I like
I
one
think,
of them.
I know I'm in the minority on this. I like Evie. Evie's great. And I kind of like
Syndicate.
No, Evie.
Oh,
the
I thought you
character.
said like Unity, not
No,
Evie. I
E-
apologize.
Yeah, no, Evie, the sister. I legitimately buy that these two are siblings. They bicker a lot. They have this fun chemistry with each other. And I enjoy them talking. I kind of enjoy that Jacob's just a meathead. I'm just like, yeah, we're in London. We're gonna start a gang. We're gonna do some stuff. And Evie's like, can we do our job, please? You freaking idiot. Constantly, it's so I enjoy them. I actually like. I wouldn't mind seeing them in a future project. I couldn't if we didn't make fun of him so much. I wouldn't remember Arno's name. Arno is basically a creative character. Like, I don't remember. The most like impactful thing he does is like get betrayed, get drunk, get depressed, comes back, get betrayed again, gets sad and drunk, and then like then his girlfriend dies. And that's like,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about right.
I think I summed up all of Unity's story. I'm just like, and Arno never really like has a revelation or moment or like he never has a
No,
he never has the
has a revelation. His revelation is life sucks without my girlfriend now.
oh yeah he's a simp. Arno is just a huge simp.
Did you not
He's-
listen to the ending of the game where he just goes on like a really nihilistic like fucking monologue because his girlfriend's dead now?
Yeah, basically. That's basically. He never you know what Arno is missing is he's missing the Kenway moment. And for those who don't know, towards the end of Assassin's Creed 4, one of the best parts of the game is Kenway's like revelation and like kind of drunken moment where he starts reliving parts of his life and he sees moments and it happens after a close friend of his dies. So there's a good moment, but he never like I never got the sense that that happened to Arno and that like he changed from it. But after it happens to Kenway and he like does all like goes through it and like rethinks his life choices, he's like, God, I'm a freaking piece of shit. I need to go and like fix my life. I need to go and like I need to fix stuff. And he like goes and becomes a better person. And like that's such a great moment in that game. And I love that like for his character. And I just never got that with Arno. I'm not saying Jacob or Evie have that. I should clarify. Jacob and Evie, I don't think have that either. They have like a cool moment. But like, I
They
just
have
feel
like
like
a sibling like, I'm sorry I hit you there.
yeah,
Don't
they
tell
have
mom,
that
let's be
moment,
friends.
which is realistic for,
Basically.
which is realistic for. But at least that's something more than Arno, where it's just like, where my girlfriend died. All right, we're gonna kill the dude. Where my girlfriend died, and just like goes for like just moves on with his life, and it's like, what even was your character motivation? What was your just the fact that this
What's
other
your deal?
girl that honestly, and his girlfriend wasn't even that like cool to him. She kind of like fucked him over.
No, she's a manipulator.
Yeah, she's a terrible person.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far, but I do agree that there was definitely moments where it's like you're more into her than she is into you, bruh. Like,
And she's
like,
just
you might wanna
way too into murder. Like she's way too into getting revenge on to the
no,
point.
the thing is like she actually has like, well, the thing, the difference between her and Arno though is she's actually has a mission that she's committed to, whereas Arno's kind of thing is he just. I think that's where we get to the problem with like this story is that like Arno doesn't really seem to have like a strong conviction towards anything besides Elise, which is weird because the way the game kind of starts off, it feels like it's pushing towards something where maybe the reason he's so protective of Elise is his dad, who was an assassin, was killed and he couldn't do anything about it. Then Monsieur de la Serre, Elise's father, dies,
Amazing,
and it's kind of partially.
I'm amazing.
Yeah,
Remember that name.
Well, I just remember Monsieur de la Serre. I don't remember his first name.
Fair.
But like,
Monsieur de la Serre.
he dies as a result of kind of Arno's like laziness, essentially, because he's
Arno
so
didn't
focused
deliver
on.
a letter.
I wanna
Yeah.
go, yeah,
Because he wants to bang Elise. Yeah.
And the way it feels like the game is building up, especially with like some of the weird like flashback, not flashbacks, like weird dream sequences or whatever that he has when he's trained to be assassin, is that a lot of what's driving Arno is the guilt that he wasn't able to save some of the people in his life. He wasn't able to save Monsieur de la Serre, his adoptive father. He wasn't able to do anything for his real father. So it feels like that the reason why he's so protective of Elise is because he lost already all these other people. He doesn't want to lose her too. That can be a good, compelling character motivation, but I think they go a little too far with it to the point where it doesn't really feel like that anymore. It feels more like, all right, he's just a simp now. Like that's the way it comes off in the story. We talked about this before. We get what the writer's intention are. It's just that the way it's coming off is very different, though, and it just feels like, yeah, Arno is so focused on Poon, he doesn't realize that he's literally helping the Templar dude who who masterminded all of this bullshit that got his other Templars killed and assassins killed.
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why I don't like Arno, because I've always said chase the. I've always respected characters that like chase the bag versus like chase the girl. What do you think I was about to say? I was gonna say bag. But like no, I almost respect people more if they're like, yeah, go after like their career stuff, which is probably why I'm okay with like Jacob and like Kenway versus people that are just like, but she's so beautiful, and just I'm just like, dude, man, focus on yourself, Arno, please, just do better. You can find.
I mean, it gets to the point where even Elise is just like, bro, go after Germain. Anyway, the person who killed my dad.
Yeah.
And leave me here to fight all of these guards and leave me to die. And he basically turns around, he's like, no, I'm gonna save you because you're one of the last good things, or maybe not good, but important things in my life right now. You're one of the things of all time.
Yeah.
And she literally, like, she gets mad at me. She gets, like, pissed. Like, my life isn't yours to save, but also I don't know if that's how saving lives work to begin with, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna choose. Like, were you trying to kill yourself?
Not to mention, like, Arno seems to forget that there was a good, like, 6 or so months where Elise, without contacting Arno, was basically not only defending herself from traitor Templars in her own group, but also from the assassins coming after her as well. Like, she could kind of handle herself, bro. You gotta give her a little bit more credit for that. Yeah, I mean, I know.
Let's not forget how the game ends. Let's not forget about what happens.
Yeah, except for when the plot dictates that she has to be dumb.
The plot's like, wait,
which is another.
She's a damsel now.
Yeah, which is another problem with the story is, and that's like the whole thing with Arno being betrayed over and over, and he keeps falling for it. It's just that, like, okay, we understand 1 or 2 betrayals, but at a certain point, Arno, it's like, can you not wise up a little? Like,
Figure
just
it out.
think for a second. It's like, come on, bro. Like, this is not the first time it's happened now.
It's not even the second. Robert, what are your kind of thoughts on like the characters and the story of either Unity or Syndicate?
Syndicate, I found pretty forgettable. Unity, slightly less forgettable. I mean, the thing of like Arno is that he doesn't really feel like that interesting of a protagonist. It's just kind of like, hey, you guys liked Ezio, you guys liked Edward. Let's try to have some charisma.
Yeah.
Which he has at the
But-
beginning of the game, and then suddenly somewhat
Yeah.
drops.
Yeah,
The
and
opening
then
is very charming.
yeah, then it turns into he's just going to get booming.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all his motivation is, at least from what I remember. It's like he's not even really like that like attached to like the assassin cause. Like I think
Yeah.
he's more with
was
the
the other-
assassins as like a matter of
Yeah.
circumstance than like an
Yeah.
actual desire and
Well,
belief
like,
in what they're fighting for.
And that's fine for like the beginning of the game because and like Robert just said, that's what Kenway was doing. But like at a certain point, like at the end of the game, he's like, and now I'm the headmaster of the assassins, and I'm just like,
No, he's
What
not.
did you do to
or
earn
not
that?
not the head. He's not like the headmaster, but he's like with them. Like I forget what his
At the end
title
of the game,
is
he
now.
literally gets kicked out of the assassins.
What is it?
Yeah,
Wait, no,
it's kind of
doesn't
weird
he,
that he gets like,
So I don't know
But
what
doesn't he
you're
get, like, a-
remembering.
he gets like
It's-
a
it's
piece
more
of
like a-
Eden or something, and like
Yeah.
Go
the
ahead,
Sword of
Seth.
Eden, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more like I don't think he gets fully kicked out. I think it's more like a suspension or something. I don't know. Like but yeah, somehow he's back in with the assassins like towards the end of the game, because we know this from the Dead Kings DLC. Everything he's doing there is like to help out the assassins, even though he's kind of like, this is the last time I'm going to help out the assassins. So I don't know. It's very weird with him. That's another thing that kind of leads into this that's really disappointing is Syndicate has actually a really interesting narrative that works really well with the setting about the assassin versus Templar conflict, where you have people on both sides of the assassins and Templars who are like, hey, we want to bury the hatchet. We've been fighting each other for centuries. It's time to bury it. But then people within their own order turns on them and like causes this basically civil war on both sides of the factions. Unfortunately, that just never really comes into the focus in the game. It's sort of just like forgotten about. I guess it just doesn't fall parts. Like, I even though I thought he sucked, like Bellic's betrayal of like Mirbo, the leader of the like Paris assassins.
Okay,
It's
you
like-
meant Unity. You said Syndicate, and I was
Oh,
very confused.
I was
Yeah,
also
made-
really confused. I was like, when
It's like,
was there a
that's Unity,
civil
yeah.
war in Syndicate? Okay.
Yeah, I was talking about Unity.
No, that makes
but-
okay. Yeah, I
but-
forgot about
yeah.
that whole civil war thing.
But no, like I remember seeing this, like this is actually really cool because like it kind of fits with the setting where like you're having a bunch of sides like against each other over like ideologies and all this shit, and people betraying each other and having them executed, and you're having the same thing here where it's like there's definitely a group of people who are like, hey, we're tired of this fight. We want to have peace between the assassins and Templars. There's got to be some way for us to come together. And then you have the most like zealous people in their group are just like, nah, fam, we just need to fight.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a Templar.
And-
That's an
That's a-
enemy.
Yeah.
Like,
Bellic,
yeah.
God, Bellic sucked. Like he was suck. He,
You want
The
to go
only-
off
the
on
only-
Bellic? Yeah.
I mean, there's not really the thing is there's not much to go off on. He's just kind of like he just calls you piss pot and like doesn't really do anything to actually teach Arno anything. He's like, I betrayed Mirabeau. Fight me, I guess. It's like it's like okay, sure. There's not much to
Or
go
like
off
the mentor.
on. Oh, the mentor fight. This is gonna be so climactic. It's at this not Notre Dame, but some other big ass church.
Dude, that was so
Um,
weird to me that it wasn't Notre Dame, by the way. Can we? Maybe that's just a nitpick on me.
It
I
kinda
feel like
makes
if you're
sense.
in.
But it's at the church where Arno goes to to like find the symbol of like how to find the assassin order that Bella gives him after the prison breakout. So the location itself kind of makes sense in my
make it
opinion.
Notre Dame. At least do something cinematic when you're in Paris. Come on, no, no,
They
no, maybe
see,
that's just
here's
me.
the thing, they already used Notre Dame for the admittedly really cool like black box assassination. One of the first ones you do. Like that
I guess
already
that's
was used
fair.
there.
Yeah, that's fair. Use it again. I don't care.
You just reminded me of something, Seth. I'll bring it up when we're doing like wrap up, I guess. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's more of a gameplay thing.
Mm-hmm. Because that's the next thing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't remember. Honestly, like, that's the thing about both, and it might just because I played Unity more recently. It's just like Syndicate's like story I don't remember too often, like too well. So it's forgettable. But Unity's story is like actually bad and like actually upsets me. So I think it's just kind of like I don't like it. And I think it's just kind of like the person, like, it's just kind of the person you are. Would you rather have boring or would you rather have like stupid? And not like funny stupid, just like this is bad writing stupid. And it's just
like the whole idiot plot like thing where it's just like
yes, idiot plot. And
it's completely based off of people being idiots.
Yes, and one of my least favorite things in any media or any fiction is idiot plot. It's just if characters just thought or had an IQ larger than the one thought they have, then this whole problem could be solved. It feels lazier to me. It feels like frustrating to like go through. Versus like some where it's like it's standard, it's whatever, it's boring, but like it's gone as soon as it's done. Like it doesn't like I don't know.
No, like I get it because like it would actually be kind of cool. It's like, yes, I know Arno is green. He gets betrayed a couple times. Wouldn't it have been cool if there was at least one moment where he's like, nah, not this time, fam. I caught this time.
Yeah.
Like,
or if like
that would have been
like
nice to have some sort of development with him, where he got smarter. I'm smarter now.
If anything, Arno gets dumber as the plot goes along because he just like, but Elise.
Yeah, he really does get a little stupider.
Okay.
Well, I think part of that's with the ending monologue of the game. Isn't he talking about having these idealized views and trying to hold on to them can give way to pretty much all of these flaws within people? And like he uses the creed as a warning, basically, of saying like you need to be able to like reflect on yourself, because if you kind of just follow an ideal blindly, like it's gonna get messed up.
Yeah, I mean, like there's that, and like I said, we talked about this before. We get that that's the message of it. It doesn't mean it was executed well.
Yeah. It's because he's not really following the creed. He's just like following another.
Stupid links to learn this lesson, basically. It's like nah, shit. We picked up on this like fucking 5 hours ago.
We picked up on this the second time you got betrayed, man. You're on betrayal like 5 or 6. Like, come on, man.
It's like whenever you have like a whole story themed around like a bunch of people being executed in the street because of their ideology not quite matching up with another, we kind of get the gist of like, yeah, maybe going a little too hardcore on that shit is probably going to be your undoing.
Yeah. That's the other thing, because I think part of it's also like I held higher like regards for like the French Revolution. It's such a cool period in history, and I feel like this isn't the best story that could have been told in that time period. With like that, like honestly, as Seth mentioned, the most interesting part is like Assassins and Templars like really close to getting a truce, but I don't really. It never felt like that kind of went anywhere, or if it did, it almost felt more like sideline because we were like still on like this love plot, this love story with Arno and Elise, but.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I mean, like where I would disagree with Drew on this is I don't necessarily think. Even with everything I've said, weirdly enough, I don't think Unity's story is really bad. It's just misguided, and it also just suffers from the fact that it just has blank characters. Which, I mean, you know, to be fair, a lot of video games have blank characters, I guess. Yeah. So, like, I don't want to be too. I guess I already been super harsh on the story shit. It's too late for that.
Me
well,
too hard.
all right, fuck. How do I salvage this and make myself sound smarter?
A little late on that. You
Yeah.
said at least 3 times.
Yeah, I don't really have a good way out of it. Like, what I'll say is this: the story I think will appeal to certain people. If you're more into if you really want an Assassin's Creed story that's more focused on like a romantic type relationship, this game will probably do it for you. It's not really what I came looking for Assassin's Creed, but it's there if you want it.
It's there. Well, as we kind of start wrapping things up, I'll let everyone kind of give their final thoughts. And also, when you give your final thoughts, I'd at the end say which one you do prefer. Because at least for me, as a probably obvious, I do kind of prefer Syndicate. I feel like a lot of this podcast was bashing on Unity. I feel like we didn't actually get into Syndicate that much.
See,
Did we touch on Syndicate's story other than just saying, it's forgettable?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing I have with these games is
Yeah.
that, like, a lot of people say, like, yeah, Syndicate was, like, a better game, but there's just kind of more to talk
Was
about
it?
with Unity as, like, a whole.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's easy to basically say that, like, Syndicate was definitely the game with the most flaws and issues, and and at times it pretty much is a bad game. Whereas Syndicate is very like
You meant
safe.
Unity. You meant Unity on the first one.
Yes, yeah. Syndicate is safe and forgettable.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of like, yeah. It's like kind of take your pick of which one. It's like, do you want busted or do you want like kind of safe and predictable? And I will say this with Syndicate story, and I'll make this short. The main story itself is kind of like forgettable. But I will say I did enjoy most of the characters and the side characters. They're not really given much to do, but I enjoyed their interactions and kind of how they go off of each other. Evie, Jacob, Henry Green, even. Like they're not like the greatest characters in the series ever for sure, but like I mean, it's it's pretty clear that there was some parts where they got to have some fun with them. And I do think that, like, for what it's worth, I do think Starrick is at least a little bit. Starrick and some of his cronies are a lot more interesting as villains than some of the ones that pop up in like Unity, because I really, I mean, like, not that it's easy for me to come up with them off the top of my head, but I remember that one theater dude that Jacob fights and like kisses him whenever he's doing like the assassination thing. I remember him way more than really any villain in Unity.
Yeah, other than like Bellic, but that's because like you were frustrated by Bellic. Yeah.
And even then, I was like, Bellic is just like, he's just an asshole. He's not even a good mentor.
He's not. He has a fun nickname for you, and that's it.
Boy, a piss pot.
What a piss pot. Like,
Yeah.
that's
It's
the
like
most entertaining.
They wanted the gruff mentor like trope without the mentor part, where he actually bothers to teach you something.
He's just a gruff asshole that's just around in your life. He's like the grumpy neighbor that you have.
Yeah, and just criticizing everything you do.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, like Syndicate, like to touch on it, like I like the co-op, or sorry, not co-op. The two characters you have. I almost kind of wish it would have been co-op. That would have been cool.
Would have been cool. Would have been cool if they did anything with the characters working together other than the final mission. But that's besides the point.
Well, like, because they wanted to be safe because Unity had so many like issues with it, and like, I like that both of them kind of branch off into different paths of just like Jacob is more combat focused, Evie is more like stealth based. They actually feel and they play differently, even though honestly they're assassin. They have the Assassin's Creed movesets. And Unity, honestly, like it's, I think Seth has said this like 3 times now at this point, but like just to say it a fourth, like there's a good game that could be Unity. Like it needs a remaster of just like the story needs to get revamped. It needs to actually work and run. There's so many glitches and like game crashes that usually don't like bother me too much, but like it's just so apparent in Unity of just like how it just doesn't run very well. The co-op aspect of it is fun. We had an enjoyable time, but that's more just because like we're playing with each other. And it could be done really well, and I think they should bring it back. It's like the best idea anyone's ever had for an Assassin's Creed game of just more people. But because, there's all these issues around Unity, and like as I mentioned, I'm not a fan of the story, and like there's all these different things. It just didn't pan out, and they kind of almost overcorrected when they went to Syndicate. I defend Syndicate a lot, but as we said, these are the two worst. And like for me, Unity's just more worse than Syndicate. Yeah.
I do have a question for you, Drew.
Yes.
So if Unity came out like this year on Xbox Series XS, PS5, do you think it would have been a better game? Like if it came out this gen instead of the last gen?
Does it still
still the same game?
Does it still have the same? Like, does it still have all like the technical problems and the story as it is?
That's the thing, is like there might be less technical problems because the hardware is better suited for what the vision was.
Here's the thing, though. Like I ran, like when we played it together with each other, I ran it on like the most modern Xbox, and it still ran like shit. It was awful.
Yeah, I mean it runs like
glitched out.
60, but it definitely still has issues though. That's the problem.
It glitched out. It glitched out all the time. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was one point where the camera just broke with my character, and I was basically like, it got stuck in like the cinematic mode, so like I was right next to Arno's shoulder, and then Arno also was like moving in slow motion for me. Like it was
okay. So I realized how I asked my question. I think what I was more referring to with the question was the scope, like the level of scope, scope that they did with Unity.
Yeah.
Do you think they should try that again on this generation? Like, do you think it would go better?
Yes, I do. I think because again, like I said, the okay, if I'm understanding the question correctly, the concept of a co-op Assassin's Creed is amazing, and I think they should do it again.
Like a big city as densely packed as like Unity gets.
Maybe not as packed as Unity gets, because again, another issue, the reason the frame drop is because people and all these things keep getting popped in, and again, like if you look at the map when you first boot up Unity, it's just filled with random nonsense and bullshit that's everywhere. It doesn't matter. So it's just like, again, you need like 20% less people, and honestly like 50% less random icons and random BS in it. So like, I don't know if that answers your question exactly. I want them to do a similar game to Unity, but I think honestly they kind of packed this thing with way more stuff than it could chew. And a lot of the stuff that's packed in here is like not meaningful.
Yeah. So you feel like if they tried something with this kind of scope, it could probably work better just because the hardware is like more powerful.
I think so. Yeah. Cause at least going with like, you know, co-op and like, you know, the different side things. I think, yes, it could work better, but that isn't the only issue with Unity. It's kind of the big apparent one. But yeah, I do think there should be something similar to it in the future.
One thing I would add on to this though is I think it's a monkey's paw with like just adding in co-op. It's like add a co-op, it'll be great. It's like as much as I love it, I know we mentioned this a lot with different games on here, but if anything that, and I know I'm just pointing towards one example, but excuse me, if anything, something like Redfall coming out this year has taught me is that we want to be careful where we ask for co-op, because it seems like for whatever reason, whenever they decide to like pivot a game over to like co-op or something along those lines, it ends up becoming even more like busted. Well, yes, there's better technology now, but like we're still having issues even to this day. And like if you ever look into like Jason Schreier's article and stuff like that, apparently Redfall started off as just another standard arcane single player game that they wanted to do, and then they were forced to pivot to like a co-op.
That's just like the game at its core wasn't really designed for co-op in mind. So it's like Assassin's Creed Unity, it kind of feels like an afterthought at points, but there was also a big selling point, kind of like Redfall.
I don't know.
So I do want to see an Assassin's Creed really try to hammer in co-op in a similar vein as Unity, because that's like what you could do with Unity's like co-op was really fun when it worked.
Yeah. If you're gonna, when I say like I want co-op in Assassin's Creed, like design the game around it. Obviously, don't do the Redfall, like, because Redfall's thing was like, it was a boring game, and then like put in co-op, and they're like, we haven't finished the regular game yet. Just put in co-op. Like, if you're gonna do co-op, like, do it right, obviously. Like,
and Unity kind of feels like that too, because like the amount of co-op missions and heists are not the most. And you can't do any of the single player missions like together. Like it's a shame because like none of the co-op missions really open up for something like the assassination black box missions that you get in the original game. It's like, that's kind of a shame. Those were the big set pieces, and you can't even do that with your friends. So
Yeah.
it's like, if it came out now, it would also have the same issue as Redfall, where it's like, the co-op is pretty bare bones, anyways.
So, no, I agree. But I think probably now we've been going on for a while, and I kind of gave my final thoughts like kind of in the middle of that. So I'll let each of you kind of talk about that. What else you want to talk about? What else you want to forgot to bring up or last points? And I will start with Randy because he hasn't talked in a minute. So
All
go
right.
ahead.
So, as much as we were like, ew, gross, or not necessarily gross, but like, Arno's a simp and all that. I do think, in my personal opinion, I like the ending better in Unity. I like that it's not just a no final word, like there's no final words or anything for Elise. No final like, Arno, thank you for getting revenge and killing German. It's just fucking. She has the opportunity to save you after you get pinned down, and you'd think for a moment like she would have a character moment and be like, all right, I need to save you because like you saved me there. But she lets her revenge kind of and pointed idea to be like, I have to get this person. They're the only thing that matters to me. Overtake her. And I like that there's just no final words or anything like that. And then it just felt in regards to Syndicate's ending. I mean, it was kind of fun. I like the end where literally the last line of just like race you to the train hideout. The train hideout was cool. And I was like, cool, they're siblings. But in regards to how I brought up earlier, like you don't work together using two assassins if I remember correctly, it was marketed that like two assassins, you get to work together. I don't remember 100% if it is marketed that you can work together or not, but it felt like you would think like, hey, brother and sister assassin, you get two playable characters, you might have some cool missions together that they don't, and then the end just ends with, because I played through it recently and I struggled to finish Syndicate. Was getting through to the end and just when you're fighting the final boss of just you go in, you fight him, and the whoever you're playing as, you get a couple hits in on him, and then it's just like, oh, he has the shroud on, so he heals up and then tosses you away, and then you switch to the other character and you run in, do the same thing, and I swear it happens 2 times for like each protagonist or like each character. It just felt very repetitive and not necessarily satisfying, in my opinion. Of just like, oh, Jacob's in trouble, and he got thrown and is knocked down for a second. Now you play Evie and you go stab him a little. Oh, Evie's in trouble now. Now you're gonna play Jacob and go do this, like run up and try and get him. Oh, Jacob's in trouble. It
To be
just,
fair,
I don't know.
Unity does the same issue too, except you're not switching. It's just like, all right, Germon has the veil or not the damn sword and he's glowing and stuff like that. You gotta sneak up and stab him. Great, do it 3 more times. He's gonna pretty much do the exact same fucking movesets over and over. Like it like both games have the exact same boss fight, except one switches between 2 characters, and even then, it's not really means that much.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I don't know. It felt different, and I liked the severity, I guess, in regards to just being like, well, you don't have any closing words. She was a flawed character, and like her flaws brought her to her end. So.
Yeah, I mean, if I actually gave a shit about those characters, I imagine it would like leave an impact on me.
Well, Seth, what are your final thoughts with these games?
I think it's kind of a shame for both of them, honestly, because like, well, I don't really feel that bad for Syndicate because I feel like Syndicate is decent enough for what it is. It had to be basically a safe game after Unity just blew up in their face. So I don't blame it too much. I think it's fun for what it is. I think the main thing holding these games back is like one, both had progression systems that had no business being there. They're just not interesting at all. Both of them are guilty of this. And I think the parkour is like probably the best elements of these games, and even then they're still kind of messy. What are my thoughts, I guess? Well, it's like I said earlier, Unity is the busted up mess, and Syndicate is the safe kind of bland option. It's like Wheaties, you know. Like it's like it's fine. You can probably do better. I would say this much though. I think both have really good art direction. There is something so cool about Syndicate that they had like a whole district themed around boats on the River Thames, and like it's just this nasty ass polluted water, and you're just jumping from boat to boat doing these like crazy well, not that crazy missions, but you're doing like little gang fights and stuff like that, jumping from boat to boat. I really like that about Syndicate. And on the other hand, with Unity, I think that game also has really good art direction in terms of its atmosphere, going between different, like when you it's like what's cool about Unity is you knew when you were in a richer part of town and when you were in the fucking slums, because the atmosphere just completely changes. The architecture completely changes. Those were some of the strongest elements about those games. I understand why they have their defenders and their fans. And if anything, I kind of hope that Ubisoft will revisit either of these two games and just figure out a way to like both games have really interesting and compelling settings. How can we actually take those settings and make them really good games? You know, I feel like that's what it's missing. Just like I would love for them to take another stab at like Victorian era London. I would love for them to take another stab at French Revolution era of Paris.
I get it.
Yeah. So is this also our last things where we get to talk about something specific that we like?
Yeah.
All right. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about
Jess is now going to talk about it for an hour.
Syndicate. It won't take as long if you don't interrupt me. Syndicate,
fair.
Yeah. So Syndicate has a really neat secret sequence midway through the game. And you can completely miss this. It's called Darkest Hour. Whenever you progress through halfway through the game, you'll notice pop up on the mini map on the River Thames like this little thing called the Darkest Hour, and it gives a lot of XP and money. You're like, what the fuck is that? So you go click on it. It is a sequence that takes you to London during World War I, where you play as Lydia Fry, one of basically Evie's granddaughter, I think. Yeah, I think it's like Evie's granddaughter. It's really cool. Basically, you're kind of set into a small district of London during World War One. Everything has been like replaced with like different assets and stuff like that. It's like, yes, are the guards still just like asset swapped guards from the same original game? Absolutely, sure. But it's kind of cool that the game just decided, and in secret, just basically put up, what if we just did one whole sequence about a cool era for an assassin to be set in, and we just like let the player just run around and fuck around with it and have fun. I would love to see something like that pop up again in like another Assassin's Creed. And like what was cool is it wasn't like a DLC you had to pay for, even though I can completely understand if you look at it, you might think it is. It's not. It's just something that's in the game where it's just like we talk about all these different eras of Assassin's Creed that we want to see. Like we want to see a proper one set in China. I definitely understand those grievances. Maybe do something like that. Maybe in your next Assassin's Creed game, throw in a little, like, here's a little sequence that you can play through, and it's like a little time period that you weren't quite expecting. That's just like a thought. Yeah. Like, it'd be kind of cool to have that.
All right. So, Seth, before I let Robert give his final thoughts, you've given good arguments for one and the other. Do you have a preference between either Unity or Syndicate, or are you both kind of like, they're both kind of bottom of the barrel in terms of like Assassin's Creed? Like you can't really decide on one or the other.
I think both games have redeemable qualities. I think I kind of hold them both at the same level because, like, the sin of Syndicate is that it's kind of bland, and then Unity's is it's a busted up mess. So, like, in a weird, it's kind of like the comparison when we had about the Justice League cut of like which one, Josh Whedon or Zack Snyder, and it's just like, Snyder was the
Can I
safer,
watch
more
neither
bland.
of them?
Yeah, like Whedon was
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's that too. It's just like whenever we talk about like, did Snyder make it any better? It's like not really. Like it addressed some issues, but it also came with a lot more of its own unique bullshit. So it's kind of like they both kind of
2
end
extra
up
hours of
ranking
it.
around the same. Yeah, they end up about the same.
Yeah. Well, Robert, it's your turn. Anything you left out, and if you have a preference between either of these games.
So I'll go to what I left out first. So Seth brought up the black box assassinations. That reminded me of
Yes.
something I was thinking about, was how this game is one of them after Brotherhood that has like a thing called full synchronization. So if you're like a completionist, you want to go back and like complete all those optional objectives.
Yeah.
Those also apply to the black box, which is supposed to be the kind of custom assassination mission, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's like here you could do whatever you want, but because there's like an optional objective, there's implied to be like a right way or a developer intended
Yeah.
way to do the mission, and it's like why are you giving me all this creativity if you're also wanting to give me an objective to like meet for this? It's like then what's the point of letting me do all this stuff if you want me to do it a certain way? Besides,
Yeah.
like, oh, if you want to go replay it later.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it kind of feels a little contradictory to me, and that's something that's kind of bothered me. But in terms of like which one I like more, as much as I kind of forgot a lot about Syndicate, I remember having like a better time with it. At least like the game
Yeah.
like pissed me off less than Unity did. I think Unity just has like a lot more memorable stuff to me, for better and for worse. So it's like, even though it's had like its issues, and I think Ubisoft really bit off a little more than they really could chew given the hardware. Because that's pretty much my biggest point of contention for Unity, is that they the Xbox One and PS4 really weren't the right like platform for it, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah.
I think they saw, oh, look how much stuff we can do that like the Xbox 360 couldn't, but it becomes quickly apparent that they couldn't do what they wanted to do with that. So
Yeah,
that
neither
kind of
system
leads,
was ready.
yeah. So like it gives like Syndicate being like, oh, this is a more fun game, but like as you guys have been talking about the whole time, it's very safe. There's nothing for it that really stands out besides the two assassins, like Jacob and Evie having like their different play styles and whatnot. That
Yeah.
in the setting is really the only things I could like take away from Syndicate. And Unity, I think there's just a lot more little nuances to talk about. It's in terms of like just everything really. So that's kind of why it's like, oh, I preferred playing Syndicate, but I just remembered more about Unity. So it's like I think I'm interested to see what I would think if I went back and like replayed Syndicate at some point. Not even just the
Yeah.
full game, just like a good like 3-4
Reminder.
hours of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of see like what did I really like and dislike about this.
Yeah.
Because like I had like a similar thing with like Devil May Cry, where before we did the Devil May Cry podcast, I did like a whole series replay, and then it like completely changed my thoughts on like DMC1, DMC4, just kind of having a fresher look. So I would be curious whether
He
how
said the
much I could say I
thing.
like Syndicate more.
He said the name of the podcast. He said the word, guys.
Shut the fuck up, Drew.
You shouldn't have done it.
I,
And we'll think. Oh shit! God damn it!
Yeah, and also
Every
like,
time.
Drew, I mean not Drew. Randy. Oh my God, I'm getting so mixed up now
Robert.
because Drew keeps interrupting me. Robert, like, I'm glad you brought up the black box missions because, like, those are also really cool. I really like the open-endedness of them. I do agree with like, yeah, they probably shouldn't have put like little constraints to make the player like, oh, this is the right way to do it because you're kind of being like you're kind of breaking the whole point of like what makes those missions cool. But they are neat. I love those black box missions anytime they show up. Mostly because I'm a big Hitman / Dishonored fan, and those give me like pretty heavy vibes of those. I am looking forward to that. They're bringing those back in like Mirage, so that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that is all of our thoughts on Assassin's Creed, both Unity and Syndicate. We're done. And let us know your thoughts in the comments as well, which game you prefer. But with every podcast, we finish with our fresh picks of the week, what we've been playing, watching, or listening to when we're not recording this podcast. So, Randy, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, what I ended up watching not too long ago was this movie called Synchronic. Let me pull up exactly when this came out. It came out in 2019. It's about these two New Orleans paramedics, and they encounter a series of like horrific deaths that are all linked back to this drug called Synchronic. Oh, they said the name of the movie. Anyway, and I think it ended up having like a pretty high match rate on Netflix with Will, and so we ended up watching it, and it was just okay. I guess popularity of it has gone down. Looking at the IMDb rating, it's a 6.2 out of 10. So, but basically they come across these deaths, and so this is my rotten pick, and
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm
I
gonna
don't know,
spoil
Randy.
it, people.
This sounds more like a meh pick.
Meh pick. I mean, I didn't think it was fine, I
Well, it
guess.
could be his Ron pick. Yeah, let go off.
His clearance aisle pick.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna
He's got clear.
spoil it a little, or not a little,
Yeah.
a lot. So
Okay, go ahead.
if you want to go watch it, it's on Netflix. Like I said, it's a meh pick in my opinion. But basically the
Yes.
drug it affects your brain, a certain part of your brain that develops over time. I forget exactly what they said exactly, but if you're younger, basically it ends up literally physically transporting you to a certain like location and in time. So like it's basically like time travel but like going back in time.
But with drugs.
Yeah, with drugs. And you have like, if you're older, it's kind of just like a hallucination. But if it's someone who's younger, it'll physically transport them there. And basically the main character, he's like, dude has brain cancer, and it's like really affecting this particular gland, so it's like it didn't fully develop. So he's like, oh, this particular part of my brain is like young enough so I could time travel. And basically his partner's daughter gets stuck back in time, and he's like, well, I gotta go get her. And what do you think happens? He gets her, and then he doesn't make it back. Oh no. And the guy's like, hey man, thanks for getting my daughter back.
It sounds like a worse deja vu, which is actually like a pretty like not super great, but like decent time travel film with like sort of similar stuff going on there with Denzel Washington. Honestly, it's mostly just Denzel Washington just carrying the shit out of that film.
That's a lot of Denzel Washington. I would say that's a lot of Denzel Washington movies. But yeah.
Yeah, that's my rotten pick.
Ron pick, right? It's the worst movie Randy's ever seen in his life. He hates it.
No, it's not.
It's
that's
on
color
Netflix.
That's Color Out of Space. Anyway, continue.
Okay. Well,
Color Out of Space or Color of Space? Was it the Nick Cage movie you're talking about?
It was the Nick Cage movie.
This is the Nick Cage movie he's talking about.
So it's called The Color of Space. It's based on a Lovecraft story, and yeah, I'm not surprised.
Fucking sucks. Anyway, that's not my rotten pick, but the other one is.
But it could be in a different episode. But for now, we're gonna talk about Robert's pick.
Yeah, I talked about this as like I think I brought this up on like the Anticipated Games podcast, Final Fantasy 16. I've been
and the crowd
playing...
went wild.
Yeah, I've been
Everyone
playing that a lot.
Let
I'm
him
like
talk, man.
about 80% of the way through the story. I think I just have like a couple more like big fights and some side quests because I want to try to get like ultimate weapon.
Mhm.
But besides that, I think it's a great game. It's definitely Final Fantasy game because now people are defending the last game like it was the best thing ever. That's like a thing of Final Fantasy is that every time the new one comes out, everyone hates the new one, or at least a good portion of the people hate the new one, and then say the old one was actually really good, and it continues the trend because Final Fantasy 16 takes a very like drastic change in like the franchise's direction, both with gameplay and for story, at least in terms of like tone. So Final Fantasy 16 it's developed a lot by people who worked on Devil May Cry, and it definitely shows with how that game plays. So
Okay. Isn't it just like the one like combat director? Because
the
I don't think it's
combat
a whole team.
director
Yeah. Not
and
like really a
also
whole team.
Platinum also helped work on it too, apparently. I
Gotcha.
was looking this up. So it's like people who like know action games worked on the combat for this. And it definitely shows just of how fluid and satisfying and how much like player expression you get using like your spells and whatnot. I think there's a lot of depth to it while also not being as difficult to grasp as something like a Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
Like it's something that you can pick up and play, have a good time with, but if you want kind of a little more nuance, there's definitely options to give some nuance to your play styles.
Yeah.
And something that really helps is that using like your skill points, you're never committed to any build. So like if you're out of skill points and you want to try something new, you could just reset any time. You wanna start like using like Phoenix and Ifrit's abilities exclusively, you could just do that. Like you could say, "Oh, I don't want to use Bahamut or Titan or whatever," and you could reset those skills back to zero. There's so much like things you can do to play with, and there's no risk or anything to it, which some people might like want more like commitment to their builds. But I think in just terms of like variety's sake, there's a lot of like toys you can play with in this game, and
Yeah.
that's not to mention like the story.
Mhm.
I know that it can feel like needlessly dark at points because this is what I would definitely say is like the darkest Final Fantasy game. Not just in terms of like subject matter, but also just in terms of just graphics and whatnot. It's definitely a very dark game.
Yeah.
I think that's led to some people like feel like a little alienated because it's like, oh, this is going to be more like a Game of Thrones instead of like Final Fantasy, but that's pretty much an argument I really would only say works for like the first few hours of the game. Like just like the demos time pretty much.
Yeah, plus also I think like the Game of Thrones comparison isn't really apt because like they didn't make anime eyes at each other in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
no, I'm
very
sorry.
much
I only
Final
watched like the
Fantasy
first couple of episodes. Am I wrong, Drew?
I don't know, man. The mount was giving certain people certain eyes. So I don't. Depends on what character we're talking about. But for the most
Did
part,
someone
no.
get called
No.
a senpai? That's a yes or no. I need a fucking answer right
Now I
now.
can
Drew.
No, but I just imagined like Peter Dinklage's character going like, it's like
Ooh,
she
senpai.
it's like I killed her. So what? She was a common whore. No, she wasn't. She was my senpai.
She was my Oshi.
Oh my god.
That's pretty much a rambling version of I think that game is fucking great.
Dude, I want anime Final Fantasy now. That's or anime. Sorry, anime.
Right.
Game of Thrones. Anime Game of Thrones is what I meant to say.
True.
Yeah,
Final
it's Game of
Fantasy's
Thrones,
always
but
been anime.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so this Game of Thrones is set in like it's like set in a high school instead of like a fucking fantasy setting.
It's an isekai.
Isekai Game of Thrones.
If you
Isekai
want an
Game of
isekai,
Thrones.
go play Stranger in Paradise.
Did you see like DC's like Isekai
I saw
Suicide
that.
Squad
Yeah,
isekai
they're
anime?
making that. Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, that version of Harley Quinn is making me feel something.
that's a good.
It's
That's a
making me
good.
feel things.
She's drawn well, is all I will say on that.
It's also Studio Trigger. So there's that
I thought
too.
it was Wit.
You're right.
I thought it was Wit.
Studio Trigger is also helping this out too.
Oh, okay,
There's
cool.
a
That's
bunch.
that's
There's
good.
a bunch of because it's
Yeah.
got Jujutsu Kaisen people, which I think that's
Mappa.
Wit, right?
No, Jujutsu Kaisen's
Um,
Mappa.
Oh well, I think that the one of the animation directors from Jujutsu Kaisen's also working on the. There's it's like the Avengers of
Yeah.
fucking like animated film. They got so many people on
Anyway,
that too.
yeah.
Anyway,
but game, Final Fantasy. Yeah.
To finish my thought, it's a really good game. Currently it's only on the PS5, but the timed exclusivity ends at like New Year's
Is it on PC?
essentially. Not yet. It's going to come to PC next year.
Yeah.
So Sony did like an exclusivity deal. It's like, oh, we're going to help fund
same thing they did with like Deathloop.
We're going to help fund all this. It's going to only be on PlayStation for so long.
Yeah.
Which luckily is only like 6 months at least.
But yeah, to tell you how like cool this game looks, as someone who's never played a Final Fantasy, and I'm not a big RPG person, which is probably why I won't play the others. I am very excited to play this game whenever it comes to Xbox or other consoles other than
it won't come to
PlayStation.
Xbox. I'm gonna go and tell you that right now.
I thought it said they like once it comes to PC it might. Anyway, that's a different topic.
At least PC. Yeah,
they said that about Final Fantasy 7 and where's that fucking game?
Fair point. All right, but all right,
16's very light in our RPG, so I think you would have a better time with it.
I'd probably enjoy it. But yeah, Seth, what is your pick?
Well, I want to jump in on that with Robert about Final Fantasy 16. I do also want to add that like it does have a very interesting combat system, which I think makes it more accessible to players who maybe are not into like character action or even fighting games, because this game's combat system is not really focused on memorizing combos at all, which is actually kind of neat. It's all based around like abilities essentially. Like you got your basic string with Clive, and then you can interweave in like the little magic burst in between hits, but most of it really kind of comes down to like all your abilities on cooldown that you kind of switch between. It's very neat. It's kind of a way of allowing players who maybe are like, oh, I don't really want to bother to learn button combos. This is probably a good game for them to try out. I have my kind of issues with it, but I do recognize that the combat is solid for what it is. I wouldn't say it's the best thing ever. There's a lot of like little technical stuff with it that I wish that they would tune up a bit. And also, I kind of agree that like the game's challenge is you really have to branch out to the side content to find the challenge, because otherwise you're just not going to find it.
Yeah, because the thing is, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to start like pretty much plowing through like normal enemies. Like you get a lot of abilities that are big like AoE effects, or if you just know how to do like air combos. If you know how to play Nero and Devil May Cry 5, Clive does a lot of similar shit.
Yeah. And like also I think it's more just like it really comes down to the enemy variety, because the bosses are I'm not counting the Ifrit stuff. The bosses are great. But like kind of the individual enemies themselves are very passive. So it's just kind of like, you could just kind of beat up on these guys, whatever. But I do think like with the stylishness of it and the fact that like I said, the abilities make it easier so you don't have to memorize like button combos is neat. Like I think that's such a neat way of like, because in a way that's kind of bringing those RPG elements back in, because it's like, oh, it's abilities on cooldowns that you're using.
This has honestly been a pretty good year for people like who want to get into action games to get an action game, because like this and Hi-Fi Rush I think are like really good ways to like get someone into an action game with like not too much of a learning curve. Or like in Hi-Fi Rush's case, it's just very intuitive to pick up on.
We're already
it's
close
very
on to
like accessible.
Oh. I'm about to say like let's not do the Hi-Fi Rush talk again. let's not start doing that again.
I got
but you. Seth, is that also your fresh pick as well, or did you have something else?
So my fresh pick is it's an RPG I started playing this year, and even though I'm not finished with it, I think it might go up in my list as one of the best RPGs I've ever played. It is Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous. I know it's a cheesy name, but my God, do I just love that game. I played through its first chapter, which took me about 14 hours, and it's great. If you know anything about Pathfinder, it's basically Dungeons and Dragons tabletop on fucking steroids. It's it's everything there in like Dungeons and Dragons plus a lot more cracked out shit. And the game itself plays like one of those like kind of old school like top down like RPGs, which is really fun. I think the thing that really gets me is it's not even like the combat stuff, it's just the story and world and how it's all unveiled to you is just so compelling to me. The game has such great encounters, and I'm not talking about fights themselves. There's just so many moments where the game just throws something at you and it allows a lot of really great like role playing elements. For example, I remember very recently where we go to this garrison overrun by demons and we're trying to take it back. We go inside this room where there's a succubus demon who has all of the old guards enthralled under a spell. The spell that she's using makes her appear as their goddess that these guards worship. One of the guards speak up and say like, "Hey, I love you because you're our goddess and shit like that. But I admit that I have been having sinful, lustful thoughts towards you." And she says something along the lines of like, "I forgive you, but I understand you don't forgive yourself. So punish yourself in the way you see fit." So the dude walks up to the succubus, rips out his own eyes, gives it to the succubus. The succubus lets the blood from the eyes drip on her tits, and she eats it in front of him. It is some hardcore fucking shit, man. And I love like the turn that because I rescued these group of like hippies that worship this dream goddess that my character was also like this same religion of, they cast a spell to basically remove this mind control spell off of most of the characters there. Even the guy who ripped out his own eyes, and he's like, oh my god, what the fuck is happening to me? So it was like, it's this crazy role-playing moment, and it's not even really a main story moment. It's just something that you can just kind of run into. I love just, oh god, I love all the little stories and choices they have and all the crazy shit you can run into. The game is expansive. Like I said, I've only beat the first chapter of like, I think 5 or 6, and it took me 14 hours, and that was like the tutorial chapter. But it doesn't feel like tutorial because the game is constantly throwing these really neat story moments that feel, if you've ever played a tabletop RPG with like friends in person, it feels like it like replicates that feeling to a T. Pathfinder Wrath of Righteous is on everything. Weirdly enough, it's even on Switch as a cloud game. So I really recommend, if you got the chance, check, and you're really into like RPGs, check this out. If you're afraid of like, well, I want the story, but I'm not really into like the combat and min-maxing your character, that's fine. The game has such a customizable difficulty that you can basically turn it onto a story mode where you're basically just doing the dialogue and story choices. It's really good.
All right. Well, the last pick for me is I watched it literally right before recording this podcast. The new Indiana Jones movie, Dial of Destiny. I got a lot of like negative reviews when it like first came out, and like honestly, I don't know what people were like. It's a fun, silly adventure. Like it's not. I'll say that it's not the best Indiana Jones. It's way better than Crystal Skull. But it's like, it's exactly probably what people expected. Harrison Ford's still good. There's not as much like big action like set pieces, except when they use like a younger version of him. But I don't know. The only thing that I really wanted to say about this movie was just like, I enjoyed it, and maybe it was just like nostalgia because I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. Like I love those movies. But I remember watching it, it's like, it's just Indiana Jones being him, It is kind of weird that like Harrison Ford's still doing it. But I thought like, there were still like a few like good like actual like touching moments and like, tongue-in-cheek joke. But ultimately, my only thing with this is just like, it's not the best, but I don't think it's as bad as like people are like putting it out to be. I think like kind of like the big like film critics got to it first, and then now that like kind of like more and more audience are seeing it, they're kind of like, it's not as bad as like it was initially put out to be. which is a
I think
weird
like
kind
the
of
Mario movie was kind of in a similar boat. It's like
yeah.
it didn't do as great with critics, and then it once general people got to see it, it kind of had a
Yeah.
better reception.
I think critics need to just get out of their own ass and just like let a fun movie be a fun movie. Like not everything needs to be Shakespeare. But
That's
that
fair.
is that is everything. With Unity, Syndicate, and our picks, I want to thank all three of you for joining me, talking to me, and sharing your opinions. So thank you, Seth, Robert, and Randy. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening, especially if you went this far, which is almost 2 hours. I'm at minute 50, so I'm going to try to wrap it up just so I can get under 2 hours. So thank you all for watching, and stay safe out there.